I would rather be an outstanding sergeant than just another officer. They offered him a commission 4 times. 4 separate occasions when the Marine Corps looked at the most decorated enlisted man in its history and said, "We want to make you an officer." 4 times, Dan Dailey said no. He was 5'6", 132 pounds, a former newspaper boy from the tenements of New York City who looked like the last man you'd pick for a fight, and turned out to be the first man through the door every time the fighting started. He earned the Medal of Honor twice, for 2 separate acts of heroism in 2 separate wars. He was recommended for a third, and the brass said no. Not because he didn't deserve it, because they decided it would be unacceptable for one man to receive 3. So they gave him a Navy Cross and a Distinguished Service Cross instead, as if handing a man lesser medals for greater valor somehow made more sense than admitting he had done the impossible 3 times. Smedley Butler, the other Marine to earn 2 Medals of Honor, called him the fightingest Marine I ever knew. General John Lejeune called him the outstanding Marine of all time. A replacement Marine in France during the First World War, upon learning that Dan Dailey was his first sergeant, said, "Oh my God, he's real." He was real. A 5'6" newspaper boy who held off 200 men alone in Beijing, swam a river under fire to retrieve a machine gun in Haiti, and led the most famous charge of the First World War with 6 words that every Marine alive can still recite from memory. "Come on, you sons of bitches. Do you want to live forever?" Daniel Joseph Dailey was born on November 11, 1873, in Glen Cove, Long Island, New York. He grew up poor, tenement poor, the kind of poor where a boy sells newspapers before school and works in a factory after. He was small, always small, but he was a boxer, and by the accounts of those who knew him, a terrifyingly good one. The kind of fighter who made bigger men back up, not because of what he could do to them, but because of how clearly he didn't care what they could do to him. In January 1899, at 25 years old, Dan Dailey walked into a Marine Corps recruiting office. He wanted to fight in the Spanish-American War. By the time he finished basic training, the war was over. He was assigned to the Asiatic Fleet. He was shipped to China, and within a year, he would earn the first of his 2 Medals of Honor in a way that nobody, including Dan Dailey, could have predicted. In the summer of 1900, the Boxer Rebellion erupted across China. Nationalist Chinese militants, the Boxers, besieged the foreign diplomatic legations in Beijing, trapping hundreds of diplomats, civilians, and a small detachment of Marines inside the embassy compound. Private Dan Dailey was part of the embassy guard. On the night of August 14, 1900, his unit was defending a section of the Tartar Wall, the ancient fortification that surrounded the Forbidden City. The wall was a critical position. If the Boxers took it, they could fire directly down into the embassy compound. Dailey's captain left the position to find reinforcements, leaving Dailey alone on the wall. Alone, at night, on a fortification that several hundred Boxers were about to attack. They came. Waves of them. Armed with rifles, swords, torches, and the fury of men who believed that foreign devils had no right to stand on Chinese soil. Dan Dailey, 26 years old, 5'6", 132 pounds, set up behind a machine gun and fired into the darkness. All night. Alone. Wave after wave of attackers crashed against his position, and wave after wave broke apart under his fire. When the machine gun jammed, he cleared it. When they got close enough to throw torches, he shot the men carrying them. When they found cover and tried to snipe him, he changed position and kept firing. When his unit returned at dawn, they found Private Dailey sitting on the wall smoking a cigarette, surrounded by the bodies of what witnesses estimated at 200 dead. He was awarded the Medal of Honor. He was 27 years old. For the next 15 years, Dan Dailey went wherever the Marine Corps sent him: Cuba, Puerto Rico, Panama, Mexico. He served aboard half a dozen ships. He was promoted steadily: corporal, sergeant, gunnery sergeant. Not because he sought advancement, but because the Marines kept putting him in places where his rank couldn't keep up with what he was doing. In 1915, the Marines were in Haiti, supporting the Haitian government against Kako insurgents in what would later be called the Banana Wars. On the night of October 24th, Gunnery Sergeant Dailey was with a 40-man patrol under the command of Major Smedley Butler, himself already a Medal of Honor recipient and one of the most legendary Marines alive. The patrol was ambushed while fording a river near Fort Dipitié. 400 Kakos hit them from 3 sides. In the chaos, the horse carrying the company's machine gun was killed, and the animal, along with the gun and its ammunition, sank to the bottom of the river. 40 Marines, 400 rebels, no machine gun. Dailey got his men to a defensive position. Then he went back, alone, into the river, under constant fire from 400 men. He swam to where the horse had gone down, dove beneath the surface, found the machine gun, freed it from the dead animal's rigging, and carried 200 pounds of weapon and ammunition more than a mile back to the Marine position. The next morning, the Marines split into 3 assault teams and attacked the Kako positions. Dailey led one of them. The rebels were annihilated. 75 killed. Dan Dailey was awarded his 2nd Medal of Honor. He was 42 years old. He was one of only 2 Marines in history to hold 2 Medals of Honor for separate actions. The other was Smedley Butler, who had watched the whole thing from the riverbank and later said, "He's the fightingest Marine I ever knew." In November 1917, First Sergeant Dan Dailey shipped to France with the 73rd Company, 6th Marine Regiment, as part of the American Expeditionary Force. He was 44 years old. Most men his age were behind desks. Dailey was behind a rifle, heading into the largest war the world had ever seen. He fought in the trenches near Verdun. He fought at the 3rd Battle of the Aisne. He was wounded. He kept going. Then came Belleau Wood. In June 1918, the German spring offensive was pushing toward Paris. The French lines were buckling. The Marines of the 4th Brigade were thrown into a gap left by the retreating French 43rd Division, with orders to stop the German advance. Belleau Wood was a dense, fortified killing ground. German machine gun nests were dug into every position. Artillery pounded the American lines without pause. The Marines were outnumbered, outgunned, and pinned down under fire so intense that moving forward seemed impossible. On June 5th, Dailey crawled out under enemy fire and extinguished a blaze in an ammunition dump that would have killed every man in the vicinity. The next day, he single-handedly took out a German machine gun nest using his Colt .45 pistol and hand grenades. He captured 13 German soldiers by himself. He was wounded 3 times across the span of a few days. And then came the moment. The Marines were pinned. The fire was constant. Men were pressing their faces into the dirt, trying to become invisible. Nobody was moving. Moving meant dying. First Sergeant Dan Dailey stood up. He looked at his men. He looked at the German lines. And he said 6 words that would echo through the next century of the Marine Corps. "Come on, you sons of bitches. Do you want to live forever?" Then he charged. The Marines followed. Every man who had been lying in the dirt, convinced that standing up was suicide, watched a 44-year-old first sergeant with 2 Medals of Honor sprint toward German machine guns, and decided that if Dan Dailey could do it, they could do it too. They took the wood. The Germans fell back. Belleau Wood became hallowed ground in Marine Corps history, the place where the Corps earned its modern reputation as the hardest fighting force in the American military. Dailey was recommended for a 3rd Medal of Honor. The brass said no. The reason was simple and bureaucratic. It was deemed unacceptable for one man to receive the Medal of Honor 3 times. No precedent, no framework, no appetite for admitting that someone had been brave enough 3 separate times to earn the highest decoration his country could give. They gave him the Distinguished Service Cross instead, and the Navy Cross, and the French Médaille Militaire. 3 medals that any Marine would be proud to wear, given because the one he deserved was considered one too many. Dan Dailey was offered a commission after Belleau Wood. He turned it down. Again. "I would rather be an outstanding sergeant than just another officer." He served through the occupation of Germany. He returned to the United States. He was promoted to Sergeant Major, the highest enlisted rank in the Marine Corps. He continued to serve until 1929, when he retired after 30 years. There was no ticker tape parade, no Bond tour, no movie deal. Smedley Butler got the fame. Chesty Puller, a young officer who had heard Dailey's stories and modeled himself on them, would carry the legend forward. Dan Dailey went back to New York. He became a security guard at a bank on Wall Street. The most decorated enlisted Marine in history, standing in a lobby, watching bankers walk past him every morning without knowing who he was. He never married. He lived with his sister. He avoided publicity. When asked about his service, he deflected. "Just another job," he said. That was all he would say. On April 27, 1937, Dan Dailey died of a heart attack in his apartment in Glendale, Queens. He was 63 years old. His family honored his wish to be buried near home rather than at Arlington, and he was interred at Cypress Hills National Cemetery in Brooklyn. His 2 Medals of Honor are displayed at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico. His words, "Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever?" are etched into a wall in the same building in letters large enough to read from across the room. A destroyer was named after him. A postage stamp was printed with his face. Every Marine who has ever served knows his name, even if the rest of the world has forgotten it. 5'6", 132 pounds. A newspaper boy from the tenements of New York who held off 200 men on a wall in Beijing, swam a river under fire in Haiti, and charged into the teeth of the German army at 44 years old with nothing but 6 words and the certainty that the men behind him would follow. They did. They always did. "Come on, you sons of bitches. Do you want to live forever?" They didn't, but he does.